Let me tell you something that fundamentally changed the way I see relationships. Emotional safety isn't a gift one person hands to another. It's a space that two people build together, brick by brick, moment by moment. And yes, it takes work. There's research that shows how feeling emotionally safe directly impacts not just relationship satisfaction, but overall well-being. When we feel safe, our nervous system calms down. Our bodies are literally wired to thrive when we know we're accepted as we are. So creating emotional safety is not just about being kind. It's about creating a foundation where love can grow. Practice compassionate listening. Listen not to respond, but to truly understand. Validate feelings, even when you don't agree. One of the hardest things to do, especially when we feel misunderstood or attacked, is to just stop and really listen. I'm talking about that deep, grounded listening where we put our defenses down and really let the other person's words land. The problem is, most of us aren't wired that way. We're wired to protect ourselves, to formulate a comeback, or to explain why we didn't mean it that way. But compassionate listening is different. It's the opposite of gearing up to defend. It's about creating a space where someone feels truly heard. When we listen this way, we're not just hearing words. We're witnessing another person's experience. We're saying, I see you, I hear you, your feelings matter. Now, this doesn't mean we're agreeing with everything that's being said. It doesn't mean we're taking responsibility for their emotions. It just means we're giving them the dignity of feeling heard. And that's powerful. One of the most common mistakes we make is thinking that listening means solving. Have you ever been in a situation where you're just trying to share how overwhelmed you feel, and before you're halfway through, someone's already offering you a dozen solutions? It's frustrating, right? Because it feels like they're trying to fix you instead of just being with you in that messy, complicated moment. Research shows that feeling heard actually lowers stress. When someone truly listens, our bodies respond as if we've just exhaled after holding our breath. It's like the tension leaves our shoulders because we no longer feel the need to prove that our feelings are valid. We can just be. I remember talking to a couple once who had been married for over 20 years. The husband said, I've spent most of my marriage trying to get her to understand why she shouldn't feel the way she does. I thought I was helping. But what I didn't realize was that every time I did that, I was telling her that her feelings were wrong. That's the danger of not listening compassionately. We unintentionally communicate that the other person's reality doesn't matter. Instead of building connection, we create a gap, a space filled with resentment and loneliness. So here's what compassionate listening looks like in practice. It's when your partner says, I feel hurt that you didn't call when you were late, and instead of jumping to, but I was busy, you say, I hear that. You felt unimportant. That wasn't my intention, but I get why it hurt. Notice how that response doesn't immediately defend or explain. It holds space for the other person's reality without minimizing it. This is tough because it requires us to hold back our own need to be right. But it's also transformative. When we respond like that, we're saying, your feelings are safe with me. Compassionate listening requires practice. It's about choosing to be present and resisting the urge to fix or explain away someone's pain. The goal isn't agreement, it's connection. We can hold someone's hurt without making it about us. We can make space for their truth without giving up our own. And when we do that, we create emotional safety, not because we agree on everything, but because we agree that both of us matter. Acknowledge your own triggers. Recognize when your past is showing up in your present. Own it. This one's tricky because, let's be honest, most of us don't like admitting when our own stuff gets in the way. It's easier to point out what the other person did wrong or how they made us feel. But sometimes our reactions have less to do with what's happening right now and more to do with what's already happened in our lives. I remember talking to someone who said, I don't know why I get so defensive when my partner asks me where I'm going. It's just a question, but it makes me feel like I'm being controlled. When we dug a little deeper, it turned out that they grew up in a home where every move was questioned and independence wasn't really allowed, even though their partner had no intention of being controlling. That simple question triggered an old fear, the fear of losing autonomy. Here's the thing, triggers are normal. They're a part of being human. But when we're not aware of them, they can hijack our reactions and leave us saying things like, "You always make me feel this way," or "Why can't you just stop doing that?" What we don't realize in those moments is that we're reacting not just to what's happening now, but to the layers of pain and fear we've been carrying for years. The first step to breaking that pattern is acknowledging it. It's saying, wait a minute, why am I feeling this way right now? Is it really about what they said? Or is it touching something deeper? This kind of honesty with ourselves takes courage. It's uncomfortable to admit when we're reacting from a wounded place. But the truth is, when we don't own our triggers, they own us. They lead us into arguments we didn't need to have. They make us defensive when no one's attacking. They convince us that we're fighting the person in front of us when really we're wrestling with ghosts from our past. It's not about blaming ourselves or excusing harmful behavior. It's about awareness. It's about pausing and saying, okay, this feeling is familiar. Where have I felt it before? What am I really reacting to? And then here's the tough part, sharing that with your partner. Not in a way that makes them responsible for fixing it, but in a way that says, I know this is mine to work on. And I just need you to know why it's hard for me. That level of vulnerability changes the dynamic. It's not about placing blame, but about seeking understanding. It lets the other person in instead of pushing them away. And when both people in a relationship are willing to do that work, to own their triggers and share them openly, it creates a space where real healing can happen. Because at the end of the day, emotional safety isn't about never being triggered. It's about recognizing those triggers together without shame and committing to working through them as a team. Communicate boundaries clearly. Safety isn't about being a doormat. It's about clearly stating what you need without blame or shame. One of the biggest myths about creating emotional safety is that it means saying yes to everything or never disagreeing. But safety doesn't come from being passive or agreeable. It comes from being honest. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about letting them know how to love you better. Here's the thing, boundaries are uncomfortable because they require us to say, this is what's okay for me and this is what isn't. And sometimes we avoid setting them because we're afraid of seeming difficult or demanding. But without boundaries, we end up feeling resentful, overwhelmed, and ironically unsafe. Imagine being in a relationship where your partner constantly interrupts you mid-sentence. You let it slide the first few times, thinking it's not worth making a big deal out of, but over time, those little interruptions start feeling bigger. You feel unheard and dismissed. The resentment builds, and suddenly one day you snap. Why can't you just let me finish for once? Your partner looks confused and maybe a little hurt. And now it's not just about the interruptions, it's about why you didn't speak up sooner. Boundaries aren't about holding in frustrations until they explode. They're about expressing your needs in real time, calmly, clearly, and without placing blame. Instead of saying, you always cut me off, try saying, I feel unheard when I'm interrupted. Can you let me finish before you respond? It's not about making someone feel guilty. It's about being honest about what you need to feel respected. One of the things I've learned is that people aren't mind readers. We expect others to just know what hurts us or what we need, and when they don't, we feel betrayed. But half the time, they're just operating from their own perspective, not realizing they've crossed a line. Communicating boundaries is like giving someone a map to navigate the relationship safely. Without it, they're wandering around, unintentionally stepping on emotional landmines. It's important to remember that boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're not about controlling someone else's behavior. They're about expressing your limits. There's a difference between saying, you can't talk to me that way, and saying, I'm not comfortable being spoken to like that. One is an accusation, and the other is a statement of self-respect. And let's not forget, setting boundaries doesn't mean they'll always be respected. Sometimes people will push back. They might feel hurt or defensive, especially if they've never had boundaries set with them before. But that doesn't mean your boundaries aren't valid. In fact, how someone reacts to your boundaries says more about them than it does about you. A healthy relationship is one where both people can voice their needs without fear of retaliation or ridicule. It's also important to respect the other person's boundaries too. Emotional safety isn't one-sided. If someone says, I need some space right now, honoring that request builds trust. It shows that their needs are just as important as yours. Communicating boundaries can feel risky, but it's the only way to cultivate real connection. It shows that you're invested enough to be honest and that you care enough to make the relationship work for both of you. And when both partners practice setting and respecting boundaries, that's when true emotional safety starts to take root. Cultivate emotional honesty. Be brave enough to share your feelings, not just the polished ones, but the messy, uncomfortable ones too. You know, it's funny how we can convince ourselves that being honest means sharing only the parts of our feelings that sound reasonable, neat, or justified. It's as if we think that emotional honesty means delivering a well-packaged version of our truth, like we're protecting the other person from the raw, unedited version of ourselves. But here's the thing. Real emotional honesty is messy. It's admitting that sometimes you feel jealous even when you know it doesn't make sense. It's saying you're hurt even when the other person didn't intend to hurt you. It's being willing to say, I'm scared that if I'm really honest, you'll think less of me. And that's terrifying because it leaves us wide open to judgment. What I've found, both in research and in life, is that real connection doesn't come from showing people our well-managed feelings. It comes from sharing the ones that are tangled up and a little bit ugly. And that's where courage comes in. We have to believe that the people who truly love us, one of the most beautiful things I've seen happen is when someone finally admits what they're feeling without trying to dress it up. I remember talking to someone who said, I always tell my partner I'm fine when I'm not. I'm afraid that if I say I'm feeling unappreciated, they'll see me as needy. So they'd stuff it down, try to manage it internally, and then wonder why they felt so alone. It wasn't until they actually said, I'm struggling because I feel like my efforts are being overlooked, that things started to shift. At first, it was hard because vulnerability always is, but it opened the door to an honest conversation. And here's what really surprised them. Instead of thinking they were being needy, their partner actually felt relieved. They'd sensed something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what. Hearing the truth, even if it was uncomfortable, felt like a weight lifting. Emotional honesty is powerful because it's rooted in authenticity. It's saying, this is where I am right now. I know it's not perfect, but it's real. It doesn't mean unloading every thought without considering how it lands. It means taking responsibility for your own emotions and sharing them without expecting someone else to fix them. It's a way of saying, I trust you enough to show you what's really going on. Sometimes we convince ourselves that honesty will break the relationship, but it's often the lack of it that causes the real damage. When we hold back, our partners sense it. They feel the disconnect, even if they can't name it. Over time, that gap grows wider, and before we know it, we're living side by side, but not really seeing each other. It's important to remember that emotional honesty doesn't guarantee a smooth conversation or an easy resolution. Sometimes it brings up things we didn't even know were there, but it's in those moments that real intimacy is born. It's when someone says, I didn't know you felt that way, but I'm glad you told me. And that's how you know you're building something real. Because you're not just showing the parts that are easy to love, you're showing the parts that are harder to understand, and you're trusting that they'll still choose to stay. The truth is, we can't create emotional safety without honesty. It's not about being right or being perfect. It's about being brave enough to say, this is what I'm feeling, and I want you to know because it matters to me. And when both people are willing to be that open, that real, that's when a relationship moves from surviving to thriving. Show up consistently, reliability builds trust, keep showing up, especially when it's hard. If I had to sum up emotional safety in one phrase, it would be this: be someone who shows up. Not just when it's convenient, not just when things are easy, but especially when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. Because here's the truth: trust isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in the small, consistent moments where you prove that your words and your actions line up. Think about it. How many times have we said something like, I'll always be there for you, only to find ourselves pulling back when things get tough? Maybe it's because we're overwhelmed, or maybe it's because we don't know what to say. But the reality is, when we say we'll be there and then don't follow through, it chips away at the foundation of safety. Showing up consistently doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean we'll never make mistakes or have moments where we fall short. What it does mean is that we make the commitment to be reliable, even when it's messy or complicated. It's about being the kind of person who follows up after a fight, who reaches out even when they don't have the perfect words, and who keeps choosing to be present when it would be easier to shut down. I once heard a story about a friend who was going through a difficult time, grief that felt like it would never end. She told me about a friend who kept texting her even when she didn't respond. The texts weren't elaborate or poetic. Sometimes they were just thinking of you today, or here if you want to talk. She admitted that she didn't always have the energy to reply, but knowing that someone kept showing up, even in that small way, made her feel less alone. That's the thing about consistency. It's not about doing it perfectly every time. It's about showing that you care enough to keep trying. When someone sees that you're willing to stand by them through the storm, they start to believe that your presence is something they can count on. And that belief, that sense of I'm not going anywhere, is where emotional safety lives. It's easy to be reliable when life is good, when the relationship is smooth and no one's hurting. But the real test is when conflict arises, when words are said that sting, or when you feel misunderstood. In those moments, showing up might look like saying, I'm still here, even though we're not on the same page right now. Or it might mean making the effort to understand when your partner pulls away rather than immediately assuming the worst. Consistency doesn't just benefit the other person, it strengthens you too. Because every time you choose to show up when it's hard, you're reminding yourself that you're capable of loving courageously. You're proving that you don't back down when things get messy. You're saying this relationship matters to me and I'm willing to put in the effort, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's what happens when two people make that commitment. They build a partnership that can withstand the hard stuff. They know that no matter how many disagreements or rough patches come up, they'll keep choosing to show up. That's how trust grows, not by never making mistakes, but by showing up after them. When you make consistency a priority, you're not just telling someone they matter, you're showing them. And that's how safety becomes more than just a feeling, it becomes a reality. Emotional safety doesn't happen by accident. It's something we build together. Through compassionate listening, acknowledging our triggers, setting clear boundaries, practicing emotional honesty, and consistently showing up. It's about making a choice over and over again to value connection over comfort, courage over avoidance, and truth over perfection. When we commit to creating emotional safety, we're not just building stronger relationships. We're building spaces where we can be fully seen, heard, and loved.